All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unravel the brilliant, completely baffling contradictions of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We're talking about a structure nestled right in Jerusalem that is just entirely unique. It's a place that completely defies conventional logic. A building where deep spirituality and incredibly strict bureaucracy collide in literally the most fascinating ways imaginable.
To really understand this place, we first have to confront its, well, visually disjointed and surprisingly messy appearance. When you walk up to it, honestly, you might be a little shocked. It doesn't have that sweeping, pristine symmetry of a grand European cathedral. Instead, you're looking at mismatched stones, walled-off sections, and an overall chaotic vibe. It kind of begs the question, if this is the holiest site to almost 2 billion Christians, why exactly does it look like this?
And the mysteries only deepen when we realize that for centuries, the Jode and Nusaybe Muslim families have been entrusted to lock and unlock its single open door. Yes, you heard that correctly. Every morning and every single night, Muslim families hold the keys to the holiest site in Christianity. Why? Well, historically, the various Christian denominations inside simply could not agree on who should have that ultimate authority.
So, let's explore Section 1, a divided holy site.
You see, the Church's chaotic state isn't a sign of neglect. Actually, it's a byproduct of intense, overlapping passion and devotion. When multiple groups revere the exact same stones, the exact same ground, compromise essentially feels like a betrayal of faith. Every single faction here is desperately trying to preserve their historical right to worship in this precise spot. So what looks like a chaotic mess to an outsider is, in reality, a complex map of deep, uncompromising love for the site.
Which brings us to Section 2, Centuries of Rebuilding.
To grasp the current layout, we really need to quickly trace how the physical space evolved, because it changed drastically over the centuries. The original massive church built by Constantine in 335 AD, it was completely leveled by the ruler Al-Hakim in 1009. So by the time the Crusaders arrived in 1099, they basically found a fragmented courtyard of separate shrines. In 1149, they just built a Romanesque roof over the whole thing to connect it. What we see today is literally the architectural scars of empires rising and falling, all stitched together into one single building.
And unlike those massive, open European basilicas, this church is completely full of blocking walls. In a normal cathedral, you walk in and see a vast, open nave leading straight to an altar. But here, you walk in and immediately face a wall. Following a massive fire in 1808, the Greek Orthodox won the bid to renovate, and they constructed inner walls right between the ancient columns, specifically to carve out an enclosed exclusive prayer area.
Let's untangle this further in Section 3, Keepers of the Keys.
So who actually runs the place? The core areas, like the tomb itself, are shared and heavily guarded by 3 primary communities: the Greek Orthodox, the Franciscans representing the Catholics, and the Armenians. These guys are known as the Big Three, and they control the lion's share of the church. But there are also smaller communities, like the Copts, the Syriacs, and the Ethiopians, who hold specific, tightly regulated zones of their own.
You know, keeping the peace among all these groups requires a truly staggering level of micromanagement. The Ottoman Muslim rulers had to impose incredibly specific schedules, right down to the exact hour of incense rituals and who holds the absolute privilege of sweeping the floor. Because in a place this holy, cleaning isn't a chore, right? It's a profound privilege and a literal claim of ownership. If it's your community's day to clean the courtyard, absolutely no one else is allowed to even pick up a broom.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, the 1852 status quo.
Eventually, these intense local squabbles caused massive international crises, because these groups were backed by global empires, like Russia backing the Orthodox and France backing the Catholics. Arguments inside this specific church literally threatened to start global wars. So the absolute crucial turning point is this invisible treaty from 1852. The Ottoman Sultan basically threw his hands up and declared a permanent freeze. The edict dictated that absolutely nothing in the church could ever be changed again. Whatever rights you had in 1852, you keep, forever.
It's super easy for modern tourists to scoff at these disputes as petty, but think about it for a second. If your neighbor left a giant couch in your shared apartment hallway, you wouldn't just accept it, right? You'd tell them to move it. Now multiply that basic territorial instinct by the holiest site in your entire faith, and it makes total sense why they will passionately fight for every single inch of sacred ground.
And nothing, literally nothing, visualizes this rigid treaty better than the famous immovable ladder.
Armenian monks used to use this ladder to hoist up food to an upper balcony when the church doors were locked. Well, because the ladder was sitting there when the 1852 status quo went into effect, and because it rests on an outer facade shared by multiple denominations, removing it requires unanimous consent, and since no one wants to concede their rights to that shared space, the ladder just sits there, decade after decade, stranded.
All right, moving to our final point, Section 5, a miracle of coexistence.
Just think about that number for a second, 1852. Since that year, the world has seen world wars, the complete fall of empires, the invention of the internet, sweeping geopolitical changes, the whole shebang. Yet inside these walls, the clock essentially stopped. And against all odds, this exact frozen state has actually maintained a fragile, enduring peace.
Of course, the immense responsibility of enforcing this centuries-old balance is no joke. It has passed from the Ottomans to the British Mandate, then the Jordanians, and today it falls to the state of Israel and local police. They have to carefully navigate staggering historical weight because any slight misstep or perceived favoritism in enforcing the status quo can immediately trigger an international diplomatic incident.
But here is where the story gets incredibly inspiring. When the tomb itself, the Edicule, was at serious risk of collapse, necessity birthed an actual miracle. For decades, it was held together by ugly iron scaffolding because they just couldn't agree on how to fix it. But when authorities warned the structure was literally about to cave in, the factions actually united. The Big Three sat down, signed an agreement, shared the costs, and perfectly executed the restoration together, proving the status quo can adapt to save the site.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, it's easy to look at the Holy Sepulchre and just see division. But if you look a little closer, you're actually seeing a masterclass in coexistence. By perfectly balancing everyone's rights, no matter how tiny, they've managed to keep the peace in one of the most hotly contested pieces of real estate on the entire planet. Leaving us with this fascinating thought: is strict, unyielding division actually the ultimate form of harmony?